Okay, cool. Morning, everybody. I'm Alex Craven. I'm one of the co-founders of the Data City and CEO. So very pleased to welcome you all to today's webinar. This is a follow-up to the report that we published in September in response to the IS8 mapping guidance that DBT provided. What we're going to do today is I'm going to introduce Andrew and Paul from our team shortly. But also we've kept this as a sort of meeting format rather than strictly a webinar, so that we can have more of a discussion. So it's not just us talking at you. So what I'd like to do is encourage anyone who's got any questions to put them in the chat, and then we'll run through a presentation and a quick demo of the data. And then we'll come to the questions in the chat at the end and have a bit of discussion, and people can actually take yourselves off mute and get involved at that point. But I think if we let Andrew get through the bulk of the presentation before people start, or we take people actually start talking to us, we might answer some questions sort of as we go in the slides. So I just like to get sort of through the content, and then we can have a bit of discussion at the end. Okay, so perhaps Andrew and Paul, if you'd just like to do a quick introduction, and then I've got a slide, and then we'll hand over to Andrew for the main presentation.
Cool. I'm Andrew Purdy. I'm a data analyst at the Data City, and I've been working on a lot of this data behind the scenes in terms of the report and the data on the platform.
Good morning, everybody. And I'm Paul Swinney. I'm Chief Economist here at the Data City.
Smashing. If we could move to the next slide, please. Who's in charge? Okay, so quick timeline refresher. For those of you living and breathing the industrial strategy, like we are. Obviously, the white paper was published in June. The sector plans are now all published for all of the IS8. And I'm sure you're all very actively engaged in actually aligning behind those sector plans now. There's a lot of activity going on with things like the Local Innovation Partnership Funds applications for the mineral authorities and many other programs kicking in now. DBT published their IS8 sector definitions in June, and obviously for industry classification nerds like us, that was the bit that we were really interested in trying to help with. So we've been running an open process trying to help with the definition of those sectors while that was happening. We've published 4 iterations of that now, and we're already looking forward to the next. And what we've tried to do is work out from DBT's own statements of the sector definitions where SIC codes are useful and where they've highlighted that they aren't, where we can help. So the sort of whole purpose of this, if we go to the next slide.
I think that's me.
Yeah, so I'll set you up here. The whole purpose of this exercise from us is really about measuring the economy. It's great that we have 8 sectors that we're focused on, but it's clear that it's very hard to measure them using SIC 2007. Even with SIC 2026 coming next year, there's a lot of gaps left in that. So what we've been trying to do is provide a sort of sensible next step from those sector definitions into a detailed taxonomy with each of the frontier economy sectors defined and all the businesses in the UK correctly classified into the 8 sectors. And at that point, I think I'll hand you over to Andrew, who's been actually doing that work, and we'll take you through the work we've done so far, and then into the Q&A at the end.
Thank you, Alex. So the plan for today is to give you a summary of the report. It's quite detailed, and it goes through each of the ISA and explains the rationale. I want to also explain why we think open data is really, really key for these sectors. And I want to show you a couple of examples of sectors where the government's approach may overstate or it might understate the sector, and why it's really important to get the sector classification right. And then I'm going to show you what the data looks like on our platform and how you can interact with it. So getting started with a summary. by writing the report, what we wanted to do was identify the evidence gaps in an SIC-based approach, which is how these sectors were defined through DBT in the government. We wanted to show where the ISA could be understated, overstated, or misclassified, and we also wanted to look ahead to the future of the ISA and look at sectors like createch, which currently doesn't have a mapping, but we think is really important for the ISA. So you'll notice that we've got open source in the industrial strategy almost everywhere on this slide. Where has that come from? This table, there's a lot going on, but I'll go through it sequentially and hopefully it'll make sense. So where we started was looking at each of the ISA and understanding whether governments provided an SIC-based definition. And for many of them, they have. So 5 out of the 8, there's an SIC-based definition. That's great, and it really helps a lot of people get behind the analysis. That's the government, local government, anyone who can access data through Companies House or other platforms. The challenge comes when it's looking at the frontier industries within the ISA. So within advanced manufacturing, looking at advanced materials, there's not an SIC-based definition for that. And really, the only ISA sector where you can reliably analyze the frontier of it is professional and business services. So that presents a challenge. Then, obviously, across all of these sectors, if you're using SICs, you have to face the challenge of companies choosing their own SIC codes. Specifically, what we mean by that is companies choosing vague SIC codes like activities of head offices, choosing the wrong SIC code, or just not updating their SIC code at all. If you're really into the data, you can get around some of this potentially by using IDBR, the government's kind of statistical data set, but getting access to that is really hard, and we know most people won't be able to get access to that. Naturally, we looked at what we'd done in the space. We're quite lucky to have worked with government across many of these sectors, like digital and technologies, advanced manufacturing. And even where we hadn't, we had relevant RTICs and we could quite easily represent the sector. So we have good coverage across each of the ISA. Finally, where this kind of all came to being was it's actually okay if you can't define the frontier industry if you've got open data available elsewhere that can define it. So in the case of life sciences, there's an open data set of companies, and it breaks it down into the frontier industries within life sciences. And that's really important for local authorities, combined authorities who want to understand what companies are operating in their area, but wouldn't be able to define the sector through SIC. They can still do that analysis. But that's the exception, life sciences. And we think the best way to really get everyone understanding these sectors together and making sure that policy is as effective as it can be is ensuring that there's open data for each of these ISA sectors. So that's the rationale behind wanting to open source this data set, and we'll come back to that at the end. I mentioned then that I was going to compare some of the sectors and talk about where a government-based definition would potentially overstate or understate a sector. So the 2 examples that I'm going to show are advanced manufacturing and defense. So the first example, I should have ordered this the other way around, but is defense. So looking at Companies House, there's 103 companies that do defense. You would hope it was a bit higher than that. IDBR is a very similar picture. It's 110. We've been working with the aerospace, defense, and space industry body, ADS Group, and we've created an ARTIC with 3,000 companies, which is a much more comprehensive definition of the sector. So there's a lot that's missing in an SIC-based approach. This is coming to the platform. Well, you have to register for interest because of the nature of the sector and kind of concerns around security, we would like, if you're interested in this data, for you to reach out to us, and we can put you in touch with the right people to make sure you get access to the data. We do have a defense RTIC on our platform at the moment. It's a little bit less detailed than this, but it's more detailed than what you could get through Companies House and SIC. So if you want the most detailed, please reach out. And then advanced manufacturing. The story here is, if you look at Companies House, this is 35,000 companies, but our definition is more like 25,000. So this is a case where potentially the sector is being overstated through Companies House. Comparing IDBR and our data, the numbers look very similar, but I think the composition of the sectors that we've chosen is potentially slightly different than IDBR, and I'll explain that now. When I was reading through the advanced manufacturing sector plan, I think one of the things that stood out to me was that the government is focusing this sector on the R&D intensive, innovative part of the manufacturing sector. And I think that's a really important distinction to make. And I'm not sure that's currently made through an SIC-based definition of the advanced manufacturing sector. So here are two examples of companies. Urban Cottage Industries Limited. This is a company that would be classified into the advanced manufacturing sector through the government's definition. They make lovely industrial lighting. I'm not knocking it. I might buy some myself, but I probably wouldn't say they're innovative. Gelion, they do next generation battery storage systems. That's manufacturing, but it's also innovative, and we think that's the kind of advanced manufacturing companies that should be included. So we're really focusing the sector in on the kind of frontier innovative section of manufacturing. And in the report, we kind of baseline how many innovative companies are captured under our definition and under the government's definition, and we're capturing a significant proportion more. And we think that's really important for making policy in this area. So I also mentioned we try to look ahead. So in the case of creative industries, obviously there's been 4 frontier industries that have been identified, but there's another really important sector that's not currently been named in that way. So this is from Creative Industries Sector Plan, and they talk about the importance of the 4 frontier industries, but also the emerging disruptive growth potential of createch. Createch, if you're unfamiliar, is a combination of creative industries and tech sector, similar in a way to fintech, as that's the combination of finance and technology. But there's a challenge. This is a sector you can't define through SIC. There's lots of very detailed reasons why you can't do that, and it's very unlikely to change even with new SIC codes next year. So we've responded quite quickly, and we've created a definition of that on our platform. I'll show you that next in demo, but these are the kinds of companies that we can identify. So Modern Synthesis Limited are a company using microbes to create fashion items. Is really cool. I don't know much about fashion. I don't know much about biology, but that sounds really cool to me. So we've put that on our platform for people to kind of explore. If you're an expert in that area and you want to expand it more, please get in touch. But I think there's a really important point here that the ISA are not static, even though there's frontier industries that have been created as part of them. Over the course of the next 10 years, it's the Invest 2035. That's the plan, to have this for 10 years. There's going to be new sectors that emerge as well. And we need a way of being able to respond to those sectors that emerge and be able to track them and create policy for them. Cool. Time for a demo. I want to show you how we've added this data to our platform and show you how you can work with it. So hopefully this is reasonably familiar. This is our product, our kind of analysis platform. I won't go into too much detail in terms of the rest of the data that we have, but I'll just want to show you the industrial strategy data. So here are the ISA. Within each of them, we have the frontier industries represented. In many cases, we've worked directly with the teams in government that are working on these sectors. I know that's the case within advanced manufacturing. We've worked with DBT to define batteries, advanced materials. Where we've not, we've found government resources or resources very close to government or very influential. So we've got very good coverage. It's worth noting that we've got each of the frontier sectors represented, but we also have the kind of remainder of the sector that's not the frontier. Obviously, there's the frontier, but there's also the rest of the sector as well. And we've got that kind of represented there. So yeah, you've got Createch in here as well. That's how you can start to interact with it. But I want to show you what it looks like if you choose a sector and want to analyze it, and the kinds of things you can look at. Standard things around you know, economic impact, number of employees, investment funding, etc. Locations, blah 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 blah. But we think this might be of interest to a lot of people.
Shall I talk? Yeah, shall I talk to this slightly? So many of you will probably have seen the DC innovation clusters map that's sort of extensively powered by our data. So obviously what that does is visualize the innovation clusters to the UK for the DCIC clusters, of which I think about 2/3, 3/4 of those are sort of powered by our data. There's then our RTICs on there, and then they've started to put the ISA, but it's the SIT code definition currently. What you can see on there is an HDB scan technology, which we have in our platform, but we also have a different clustering technology called GMM, which is the one that's on the screen at the moment. And the reason we're showing you this is because the HDB clusters analysis is based, and the DCIC clusters map is based on finding clusters of companies which are geospatially co-located around a point around the country. But those clusters are using a mathematical approach which isn't designed to sort of allow direct comparison of areas. GMM is another way of looking at it, so that we've split the sector into a defined number of clusters, and those clusters are sized by the fact that we've chosen to split it into, in this case, up to 31 clusters, which means you can compare the clusters to each other on the same sort of basis, rather than sort of taking a very large area and compare it to a very small one. There's a lot. The other benefit here, yeah, is that you can actually then get the sector breakdowns, and obviously what you can then do is click through to the actual companies in the cluster, which obviously isn't disclosed to the DCIC clusters map. And this, I think, for those of you in sort of local government or willing to sort of dig into clusters, will find this useful. It allows you to compare two geographies on a sort of more even basis. Okay, I'm back over to you, Andrew.
Cool. I think actually it's coming back to you, Alex. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I think it's Paul, actually.
Yeah, over to me. Thank you very much, Alex and Andrew. I think that hopefully that clusters tool gets people excited, because I certainly get very excited about it, and the way that it can visualize those clusters, and you can choose what your parameters are to define what those clusters are, and then, as Alex says, then get you something which is then comparable across the country, rather than define a cluster within your area, but then how do you get a benchmark? What are the comparisons you're going to go against? And that tool allows you to do that really, really quickly. Right, so what's next in that case? And so hopefully what we've shown to you is that the government has defined an industrial strategy. It's defined, or it's identified 8 sectors that it wants to look at, but it can't actually measure them. which is a bit of a challenge. And hopefully what we've shown you today is that the data cities approach actually allows us to measure those sectors, which hopefully means that this industrial strategy will have a much greater amount of longevity than what previous versions of it have had under previous governments. SIC code's obviously the big challenge around that. I think SIC's got a challenge in terms of how it defines industries today and the sectors as they are currently defined. But there was also an issue about, as the frontier continues to develop, as the economy continues to become ever more complex, those SIC codes will struggle to capture those new industries as they emerge as well. And that's going to be a really important part of understanding the performance of the UK economy over coming years, is how our sectors like Career Tech are performing, for example, or how our sectors that don't even exist today, that we haven't even dreamed up yet, performing. And certainly the data city approach will allow us to continue to track that. So how do you then get involved with this? Well, there are three things for us to suggest to you today in terms of working with us. First one is to get a free trial of the data. Just go to our website, sign up, and you can play around with it. And you can have a tour of the closed data as it currently is, because it sits on our platform. We're also, secondly, running a working group where we want to think about how do we take this closed data and make it open data, and how do we continue to work with these definitions as the economy continues to develop and progress. We'd love you to be part of that working group, and my call to you is to sign up to that working group to help us do that. And then the third one, related to the second one, then, is to help us publish this as open data. Currently, it sits as closed data, but our dream is to make this data available. So it is one source of truth that everyone can use when they're looking at the industrial strategy, not just from a national perspective, but from a local perspective as well. And we really want to call on the government to assist us to make that happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Right, so that is actually the end of the presentation for today. We're more than happy to take any questions or go into more detail if people have specific questions on the report. Hoping everybody on this call's read the report ahead of this session, but I appreciate some of you may not, or you may not have read all of it. Anybody got any questions? We have a cheers got to run, no problem, Austin. There must be some questions. Hi, Gareth.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. I've started delving, so I'm already subscribed to your platform and use it as much as I can. But it is incredibly detailed and complex. So I mean, I guess my question is around additional training to be able to use the data in the way that you're hoping we can use it.
Yeah, so absolutely. If you need any help, reach out to the account support team. So you should have a named account manager, either be Molly or Annika.
Yeah.
If you start there, and then if need be, Andrew can join a call, and we can, if you've got specific questions that you're trying to sort of find answers to, that's probably a good way to start, and we can show you how to get there quickly.
Yeah, fantastic. So my interest is the life sciences sector within Wales, because that's where I'm based. But and part of the reason I've started using your platform is because I want to be able to properly compare it to the rest of the UK and other regions. So that's where my interest is to properly understanding that sector within Wales, and being able to see where it's lagging behind other regions and explore what I can do to help that.
Great. Have you found the compare tool in the platform yet?
I have found these tools, but I think it's a learning process because there's so much there. So
there is great. Okay, well we'll get I think it's Molly, isn't it? Who's so we'll follow up with Molly and help. If anybody else would like a sort of more detailed run through, more than happy to run a sort of little mini webinar with a few people across local government if it's helpful, or we can do it one-to-one. Whatever, we're here to help. Right, I've got a few questions coming in. Is that okay, Gareth?
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you.
Cool. A few questions coming through in the chat. Okay. Have conversations been had with the ONS? Interesting you say that. I know they're trying to map industrial strategy sectors, joining up them. So Andrew and I were actually in the ONS in Manchester last Thursday, talking about industrial strategy and SIC 26. The ONS will not look at frontier sectors unless they are part of the SIC framework. is my understanding for good reasons. You know, that they can't deviate from methodological approaches that don't align to SIC and national statistics. So I think the ONS will try and define the ISA using SIC and trying to correct that through the IDBR, and the IDBR has been retired and replaced by the SBR. But they won't have a correct exit code. The 626 revision is pretty locked in now from what we saw last week. There was no commitment to a time frame for a further revision. It was ruled out. It will not be within the next 5 years, was as much as we could, or they were able to say at this stage. And you know, it's not criticism of them. It's because it's a United Nations driven initiative. There's a lot of complexity in trying to maintain a statistical framework which allows international comparison. Yeah. So, you know, we had a good working session. There's quite a lot of us there for a full day working session, but I think there's that sort of friction between alignment to what will be official statistics and the ONS are happy to stand behind, and what the rest of us all accepts is the reality of the economy, which is more complex, nuanced, and faster evolving than official statistics can ever be. And that's hopefully where we fit in. Hope that helps, Catherine. Paul Gibbons, what have we learned through creating the closed data set within defence that SICs and RTICs haven't told you? I think the simple answer there is a lot of companies working in defence deliberately do not want to be identified as working in defence, either on their website, their SIC code selection, or anywhere else. Only by working with ADS are we able to sort of get under the hood of that. The other thing is, even where companies quite transparently talk about products and services which have clear defence applications, they are less likely to mention that they actually apply them to the defence sector. So that sort of dual use view is a critical part of the website-based mapping that we've done. So that is finding people who manufacture parts and components for often in the manufacturing company, or so it could be cyber, which serve many markets, one of which is defence, but they'll probably leave the defence bit off their website. So it's about that ability to sort of look for dual use technologies, products and services.
But just a little bit as well, beyond just kind of dual use, it's the overlap between the different ISA. So companies applying a specific digital and technology to defence or advanced manufacturing, and seeing how each of these kind of overlap. That's very hard to do, or not possible to do, if you assume a company is just in one sector and it's primarily just in that sector. So yeah, that's kind of how RTICs and our approach has helped us there.
Eduardo, would your approach be able to say something about the territorial spread of granular SRC sectors across places and regions to be able to map inter-regional economic independencies? Who'd like to have a go at that one? Paul? Yeah.
Alex, yeah. So great.
Oh.
I think the most powerful thing about the DataCities data is that it's built from individual companies. And what that means is that it allows you to build statistics in a much more flexible way than what you can get elsewhere, because you literally have got the individual building blocks of that data set. So from a geography's perspective, that means you can then go in and basically build whatever geography you want. You know, you're not limited to local authority definitions or what other local government definitions that the data might come in when it's aggregated. But also means that you can actually cross-tab on different variables as well. So if you wanted to know about how much investment had been going into the life sciences sector in different parts of the country, you can do that. And you can do those cross-tabs within that, rather than only be able to look at life sciences in a particular geography, then investment into a particular geography, and those things not being linked when you look at the data. In terms of the specifics around the interrelatedness, because data doesn't exist in the UK about trading flows between companies, there's no source that allows you to directly look at that interrelatedness. But what you can do at the very least with our data is that you can look at literally dots on the map and see where they are based and see where they cluster. And I think there's probably quite a lot that you can infer from that because we're able to provide that level of granularity.
Thank you, Paul. Hopefully that will answer the question, Eduardo. Kapila, do you think you can better categorize more traditional and established sectors using your methodology, such as book publishing? So the short answer to that is yes. Obviously, mostly we are focused on sectors that do not have SIC codes. However, the method, provided they have a website, we can correctly assign them. So, for instance, we have a product which we call Real SICs, which looks at a company's website and then assigns the correct SIC codes. So where a company, the classic example is a company's chosen activities of head office at company's house, which isn't incorrect, but doesn't actually describe what the company does. Yeah, Andrew's going to show this. What we do is look at the website and correctly assign the SIC codes. Equally, if you wanted to dig into the sector, so let's say the SIC code for book publishing is too broad a definition. I'm assuming there is a SIC code for book publishing. We can create custom definitions which allow you to subdivide the book publishing sector into sector verticals if you wanted to tease out different aspects of it. Yeah, what Andrew's showing you here is how the companies in the SIC code activities of head office are redistributed by our AI into the sectors that they actually operate in. So you can see there, management consulting, information technology near the top.
This seems to be quite a big issue in terms of activities of head offices specifically. It's an example we go through in the report, but from the research that I've done, this is an issue that also affects government in terms of some of the data that they can publish. In the past, it has stopped publications happening because it's not clear what companies with activities of head offices actually do. So yeah, as Alex says, this is an area where we can provide a bit more clarity.
We have a customer base where this is really stark, which probably isn't one that's very familiar to most people on this call. Although I think I saw in the attendee list there were a couple of our clients in the banking sector. So one of the issues banks face is when you apply for a bank account, they refer to your SIC code at company's house to decide whether or not they can give you a bank account, and if so, whether you need to be flagged for an anti-money laundering process, enhanced due diligence. Because when they receive the SIC code from company's house, they are incorrect or, in this case, sort of useless for the purposes of anti-money laundering obligations. About 40% of the time, those bank account applications are subject to a manual review. And it's a stat which you don't hear outside of banking. You know, banks know that SIC codes are not useful 4 times out of 10 for companies in the UK. So there is actually just quite a large piece of work to do to reassign companies out of it. The key offenders are activities of head office, but also other business services now elsewhere classified. Between them, they account for about 25% of all active companies. And then there's a load of others, and then there's a load of companies who've just chosen the wrong SIC code. You know, there are lots of butchers who've chosen IT and IT companies who've chosen growing of rice, who just need sorting into the correct SIC codes. Hopefully that answers your question. Catherine, when you talk about trying to make the data open, what would you envisage this looking like? Would it be available at local authority level? The dream is that we publish company registration numbers with their associated classifications by sector, by vertical. That would be the ultimate expression of it. And then there's varying degrees of that. So if you think about the DSIC clusters map, that is the first layer of open data. So providing that we can find an ongoing license arrangement with DSIT, we can keep publishing our cluster mapping on the DSIT Innovation Clusters Mapping tool. So that's aggregated from our data. But the dream actually is to get down to company levels so that you can sort of replicate this analysis we're showing you here yourselves. And actually, there's 2 layers to that. One, it would be for public sector and academic use only, but actually the dream would be to publish it truly openly, let our competitors use it as much as we do. But publishing open data isn't free. There's a lot of effort required to produce and maintain that data to the highest possible quality. So there needs to be a funding mechanism available. And Catherine, you've also put, how does data compare to official statistics? Do our numbers correspond roughly with? Yeah, so what if in the report we've actually produced a table, Catherine, which answers that question. So I don't know if you want to perhaps jump to it, Andrew. Yeah. So where we go, here we go. So what we've tried to do is show what Companies House says, what official statistics, where it's available, so the IDBR, ONS, and then what we say. So the answer to that is for some of them, we agree on the. It's got to be careful here, don't we? So the headline numbers may agree, but that doesn't mean we agree on the actual composition of the companies that achieve that number. And unfortunately, we don't have access to IDBR, so we cannot tell you whether that 25,000 companies is, 90% the same as the ONS or 10% the same. And particularly problematic with the IDBR is that we will never be allowed to do that, because anything that could lead to disclosure would put them in trouble with their survey methods. So we try, there's a sense check there that we're not wildly out. But we think we're at least, if not, well, actually, yeah, being honest, I think we think we're probably more accurate. So Todd, we do actually have a solution. So if you're familiar with our platform, we've launched a data point which attempts to recreate the what we call where, which is the distribution of economic activity of companies across their locations. So we work with our data provider Lightcast, who have profiles data and jobs and skills data. And what we do is distribute the economic output of a company across its locations. Andrew's jumping to it here. Using a proxy from profiles data set from LinkedIn, which if you think, from Lightcast, which if you think LinkedIn, gives us a sort of number of locations, and also the proportion of profiles at each location means we can weight the reported headcount at Companies House across the locations. But also by classifying the job titles of people, we can make statements about what happens at each location. So identification of warehousing distribution centres versus R&D, etc. So it's in the analysis we've done, it very closely matches the conclusion of IDBR, particularly for frontier economy sectors. It's not a perfect methodology, but nor is IDBR, but it seems to pretty much agree with it. So the short answer to that, Todd, is yes. Any other questions? Final call for questions, last orders. So just reiterate the things we would love now. We would love any of you who have platform access. So Gareth, we want people to use the data and ask us the questions and succeed in using the data. And we are here to support. We provide unlimited free support to all our customers in the closed data environment. We'd love those of you working with this data to join our working group, which we're trying to make a sort of cross-government, departmental, but also local government and industry place where people actually having to apply this data to interventions, to local innovation partnership fund bids, to all of the things that we actually want to do to actually deliver the industrial strategy, to get together and share their use cases, problems, give us challenges, stuff that might be part of our roadmap, but also might be stuff we hand to other data providers, might be stuff for Lightcast, jobs and skills, etc. One instance, or Deal Room, our investment data partners. And that would be great. And then through that, we're also looking for support for this call to government to help us fund this as open data. We have got some positive conversations going, but I think the more people sort of nudge DCIT, DBT to support us, the better. So if you are speaking to people in central government about this, please do mention that you would like them to find a way, help us find a way. Those are the three sort of asks. Okay. Yeah. So Richard. So yeah, the dream is, at the very least, public sector and academic use, but we'd actually like it to be for commercial use as well. But we must, obviously, we've got to survive as a business, so we can't totally just give away all our IP for free. Yeah. All righty. Okay. Thanks, everybody.